Morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. As you know, we are here for the On Your Mark. So it's the race for business as usual. So Keith Crane is the Director of Research and Insight, and Jean-Paul Hughes is the Group Corrective Director for Communicorp, who are the umbrella company for, as we know, our local radio station, Hertfordshire. So we're lucky to be joined by Debbie Chadwick and John Darren, who does the Drive Time show. Hope you do listen to him. He's a great one. There's some great music that gets played. So back to the webinar. So Keith and John are going to start, like you do at the beginning of any race, with the preparation and planning, and then what to expect at the start line, going right through to the finish line, and hopefully to win the race with business. So if I can hand over to both of you, and here we go.
Yes, good morning everyone. I hope you're all well. I'm just going to share my screen with you just now. Please just let me know if anybody has any issues seeing it, and we'll just get started straight away. Welcome to On Your Marks, which is a webinar from CommunicorpUK. As has already been mentioned, we are the parent company of Heart Radio in Hertfordshire, amongst other radio stations. And we're just here to give you a webinar today called On Your Marks, which is in relation to economic restarting post-COVID-19 lockdown. So just a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. You know, as I said, the webinar will last around 45 minutes, and we'll definitely follow up with any questions that you might have after the event, but please do feel free to reach out to us directly after this if you have a need to. A recording of the session has been made and will be sent round after the session too. So if you have to leave early for whatever reason, we'll make sure you don't miss out. Lastly, just a request that you all ensure your microphones are on mute for the duration of the webinar to avoid any feedback. So let's get started. So a short introduction. As I said, my name's Keith Crane. I'm the Research and Insight Director here at CommunicorpUK. I've got 3 specialties in work life: marketing and advertising strategy, planning and intelligence, and market research and insight. And I head up our in-house but standalone market research agency, which is a certified MRS company partner. And we've been working with a variety of customers across the world of business in this agency for almost 5 years now. Our current client list includes all manner of SME businesses, public transport providers, some of the UK's largest music and event venues, FTSE Top 25 PLCs, local authority, and both FE and HE education institutions. And what this has allowed us to do is to generate a really holistic view of how the COVID-19 outbreak, lockdown, and subsequent economic deep freeze that we've temporarily experienced is impacting on businesses up and down the country and across multiple sectors. So as a business, we're here to focus on local and regional businesses in the main. It's pretty much our sole focus. So any information I give is designed and created with you guys in mind. You will no doubt read articles left, right and centre from the likes of Mark Ritson in Marketing Week, Things in Campaign magazine, and all the big national consultancy firms such as Deloitte and so on. And these are all great and they most definitely have a place, but fundamentally they speak for and are funded by the national marketplace. So we'll use this webinar to see if we can help you navigate through the field and become winners by standing out in what is about to be a very saturated crowd. So the agenda for what we'll be covering over the next little while, looking at 2020 to date, how was the economy performing in the back end of 2019? What was the first quarter looking like and where are we now? So who are the winners and who are the losers in this one? In Staggered Start, we'll be looking at what we see as waves 1, 2 and 3. So fundamentally, we have a staggered start to firing up the economic engine again. And in Race Prep, it will be asking the question, are you ready? Do you know how your customers feel? Do you know what they're doing? And do you know how they're going to react, interact, and potentially purchase or engage in your sector? When we get to the start line, when the starting pistol is fired for your wave, it's going to get very busy very quickly and really loud really quickly. So in this section, we'll help you position your brand and business to ensure that you don't get trampled on at the start line. So a fast start is important, but equally important is understanding that this is a marathon and not a sprint. So unless you had it totally nailed before lockdown, 100% of your customers aren't all of a sudden going to come flocking back unless you give them a clear and compelling reason to do so. And even if you were amazing before this, but let's be honest, none of us really are, then you still have an opportunity here to steal share from your competitors and gain an advantage from the start. And when the finishing line is in sight, it's important to note that actually there isn't one. So we'll just wrap my section up by chatting through what we expect the economy to do through the rest of 2020 and into 2021 and beyond. Thereafter, the bones of everything we talk about today, barring the economic position and uncertainty, is based on a tried and tested successful way of delivering peak marketing performance for our clients. So at the end of my part, I'll pass over to Group Creative Director John Paul Hughes to take you through how to bring this whole thing to life. So in the early part of 2020, after some Brexit clarification, I'm sure some of us might be struggling to remember that word, it seems a long time ago, we've had that clarification across the UK. We could have been forgiven for thinking that this straight road was the path that we were on. But fundamentally, it looked a little more like this, as on a 3-month rolling basis, the economy grew by just 0.1% in December and February, December through February. So there was every chance that we were headed for recession anyway, actually, but nothing on this scale. The economy went into reverse in February as GDP growth declined by 0.1% in February, even before the onset of the coronavirus pandemic. So the road actually began to look a little bit like this. So during that month, in the services sector, which encompasses industries from banking to restaurants, they posted a 0% growth in the month. Manufacturing showing a positive growth of 0.5% in February, with a little return to form post-Brexit clarification. But the construction industry itself recorded an absolute disastrous decline of 1.7% in the month, primarily due to the inclement weather we received at that time. So the upshot of it is that the economy now looks a bit like this. COVID-19 came along, and when looking at the first quarter of 2020, UK GDP across January to March fell 2% compared with the previous quarter, which was its largest drop since the 2008 financial crisis. Now, that's a word that's used a lot, but accurately describes the current situation the economy finds itself in. On a standalone basis, the UK gross domestic product fell by 5.8% in March compared with the previous month, the largest single drop since monthly tracking began 23 years ago. And the biggest losers in this economic slump has mainly been services and construction, both seeing record declines, with the likes of education, car sales, public transport and restaurants or other out-of-home leisure all falling to an almost complete stop over the last couple of months. Until the end of February, the UK had been the scene of over 4 years of growth in UK household spending, but the pandemic has also put an end to that run with a 1.7% fall in the first quarter. So as things currently stand, the UK at just under 2% down in terms of GDP year to date is in a worse state than the US economy at just over 1% down, but in a significantly better position in the Eurozone, which is at almost 4% down. However, it is worth noting that this reflects the different start times of lockdown in each of those countries. But the central bank has estimated, and we've seen further clarification on that today, that the economy would contract by a further 25% in the second quarter. This would mean an almost 30% drop in the first half of 2020, making it the fastest and deepest recession in the United Kingdom for 300 years. So this week, the UK government issued, last week, the UK government issued further guidance on the gradual restart of the economy, but there are doubts as to whether there will be a sharp rebound as originally anticipated. And James Smith, who was an economist at ING, stated that the prospects of a V-shaped recovery to the economy have long since faded, and we don't expect the size of the UK economy to return to pre-virus levels until at least early 2022. The final results from Wave 3 of the Office for National Statistics Business Impact of Coronavirus survey carried out in the middle of April showed 58% of businesses that were still in operation had seen their turnover decrease from pre-crisis levels. And of this group, around 2/5 of businesses experienced a decline in turnover in excess of 50%, which further backs up the information that we're seeing from the OBR and the ONS in recent times. So, whilst it is clear that the landscape for some sectors, particularly in high footfall, mass participation, scale event venues and the likes, has changed for the foreseeable future or until a vaccine or effective treatment has found, there are other areas of business that are about to be allowed to open, to scale back up, or in some cases open their doors again for the first time since the crisis hit. And it's likely to be done in waves. I was chatting this through with my colleague Gavin Bruce, who's one of the 2 regional managing directors here at CommunicorpUK, and what we realised was that many leaders have conflicting attitudes towards a crisis, and at times to our fellow citizens of the world. So I prefer to avoid the current White House rhetoric, but instead look to former US President John F. Kennedy for inspiration. And he observed that the Chinese used 2 simple symbols to write the word crisis. One part stands for danger and the other for opportunity. So in a crisis, we need to be aware of the danger, but also recognise the opportunity that it can afford us. So in the staggered start section, we're going to be looking at different stages of business restart, and I'll refer to them as waves 1, 2, and 3, because fundamentally we have a staggered start to firing up the economic engine again. So we are currently just at the starting point of wave 2. After an initial panic and knee-jerk reaction, wave 1 of businesses who have traded their way through the lockdown are beginning to see the fruits of their efforts being noted. These businesses and brands have, by and large, been the recipient of kind sentiment from members of the public, as their perception of delivering a vital service has put them to the forefront of the customer psyche. Businesses in this wave include public transport operators, supermarkets, pharmacy, banks, home improvement stores, and online food and drink retail. Indeed, Asin Sheikh, co-founder and CMO of Flavourly, who is one of our clients here at CommunicorpUK, has reported a 400% increase in sales during lockdown as consumers shift their alcohol, in this case specifically craft beer, purchasing habits online. Other businesses gaining good sentiment during this time are the likes of Unilever, NCP for offering free parking to all NHS and key workers, and the likes of British Land, which owns shopping centres including the Meadowhall in Sheffield, for example, who scrapped rent for SMEs renting its space across that time. In wave 2, we expect to see some open already, some opening soon, the type of businesses that can operate safely in a socially distanced society, either with or without additional measures being put in place. So this we've already seen includes some leisure activities such as golf courses, currently in England only, but as of today in Scotland as well. But the main areas we'll see here are around fast food and coffee shops. So for example, these will have to become takeaway only and changes will have to be made in those stores. But also household and essential retail stores of below a certain square meterage, and where guarantees can be made of maximum numbers allowed in place at any one time. Motor dealers, service and repair centres, council waste recycling centres, construction sites, non-essential manufacturing sites, tradespeople and cleaners and so on, all allowed to be reopening either now or imminently. In wave 3, which is likely to be July at the very earliest and likely phased throughout the following 9 to 12 months, depending on the business type, this will include non-essential retail, restaurants, pubs, bars, gyms and leisure centres, as well as hotels and sporting venues or live music venues with fans inside, and so on. So if you're operating a wave 1 business and you're on this webinar, happy days and good luck to you. Now should be a time for reflection to understand what, if anything, you need to do to take advantage of your continued presence during the lockdown period. If you are in wave 2, you're literally on the start blocks to recovery right now, and how well you place yourselves throughout this period will be determined by the steps you've taken in the last month or two and the approach you take now with what actions you already have in place. If you're in wave 3, you're not quite at the start yet, but putting in the groundwork you absolutely need to be focusing on to ensure you don't miss out when the time comes. Fundamentally, every single one of us are going to lose something that we had in 2019 here, certainly ourselves included. But if anyone has the false perception, as I said, that it's a cast iron guarantee that 100% of your customers are simply going to naturally come flocking back when lockdown is lifted, or when things start to return to normal, then I'm afraid you're sadly mistaken, and you will be fortunate if they do. Some of you, particularly those of you in organisations such as colleges, universities, schools and so on, will be in the lucky cohort, but others will have to fight hard to get back on track. But the opportunity is there to not just get back to something resembling a normal working performance, but played right is one that can see you not only retain most of the custom you had previously, but steal a march on your competitors both nationally and locally. So it might sound counterintuitive in a recession, but trust me, the opportunity to grow your market share is there right now, right in front of you. So let's talk through how to consider doing that. Once I've had a drink of coffee. So, It starts with preparing to succeed. Anyone that reads marketing trade press will have heard the bold Mark Ritson stating that the best marketers will be upping, not cutting their budgets throughout COVID-19, which was featured in Marketing Week a few weeks back. Almost as if the best marketers don't work for small firms, which we all know just isn't true. I think one thing that we all know by now is that recession actually does provide an opportunity for brand awareness and market share growth by being prepared to take a short-term hit for a long-term gain. Everyone from the London Business School to Kantar, Forbes, Harvard Business Review, and everyone in between advocate for being there, keeping the brand light burning and growing share as a result during this period of self-isolation, post-lockdown time and uncertainty. But, and here's the big kicker, if you work in our world, and that's outside of the national agency market, it's much easier said than done. There are huge swathes of highly successful businesses right across the country that had budgets that were previously the envy of many a marketer that are closing doors, furloughing staff, halting operations, and sadly, in some circumstances, even shutting down altogether. So our organisation, CommunicorpUK, primarily works with SMEs and public sector local authority clients, as does Heart Radio in Hertfordshire. But in this world, an SME with a turnover of £35 million that can barely keep the lights on, or a local council who are having to plough serious amounts of cash into things like PPE, care provision, and even refuse collection, aren't going to have a collective brainwave to decide to increase their ad spend. We know it, you know it, and almost everyone outside agency land knows it. It's naturally going to have decreased at this time. But what's more important right now is evaluating, understanding, curating, feeling, and being prepared. And this is where your race prep comes in. So, do you feel that you're ready? Do you know how your customers feel? And do you know how they're going to react and where their pounds are going to go post, post everything returning to some semblance of normality? What are they doing right now? Fundamentally, the population has been exposed to media across all varieties, whether it be news, TV, radio, social media, and more than ever before in recent times. And their opinions have changed, and in some instances, quite considerably. So here's some examples from Google Trends in recent times. Restaurants are way less important than delivery. Everyone wants to know how to make a face mask out of an old t-shirt all of a sudden. And yes, Dettol have had to release some information from their department of stating the bleeding obvious. So use the time before you ramp up again to ensure that you are in the best possible shape to succeed. Audit your sound, feel, look, message, product offering, pricing and sentiment versus your competitors before you announce big and bold, surprise, we're back. This is step one in our process, which I'll recap shortly. Now, this slide might quite be the most British thing you'll ever see. We really are an indecisive bunch. But what it also highlights is that what you think you may know may indeed not be reality. What you see here is that, converse to what you may believe, in the restaurant industry, the longer lockdown or post-lockdown restrictions go on, the less people will consider going to restaurants as often as they did before. Now, there's a mix of reasons why this is a growing trend. It could be fear. Is social distancing and therefore protecting yourself and your loved ones really possible at a restaurant? Is it maybe that people who have been on reduced or indeed no wages for a period of time just simply can't afford it and won't be able to for a while? Or is it perhaps, and as I suspect, that more insightfully over and above that, we're beginning to see a whole new wave of behaviours of people across every demographic, cooking more, doing it from scratch, and preparing their meals as part of an in-home social experience. There's more to it than meets the eye oftentimes. So we have seen from other research that following an initial rally round effect, levels of support for the government's response to the pandemic has dropped considerably. Support for social distancing measures remains high, and many fear that we are now heading for a second peak. There is an increase in the number of people who do not feel that the majority of other citizens are playing their part to help prevent the spread of the virus. So this kind of social discord can result in an unconscious bias to engage with whichever brand or product can best match how they are feeling, or how best a brand can ensure their safety when interacting with them. So fundamentally, things are changing, and we'll have to work much harder, be much cuter, and significantly more creative in our execution, strategy, and delivery to ensure that as many of your previous customers as possible come flocking back. People are going to have 3 major hangovers for the next 18 months, at least, perhaps longer, with caution being the order of the day for many. Caution about the economy and spending. In the upcoming market, there will be less spur-of-the-moment spending and more considered and planned out purchases. People may need convincing of your business security and product quality, but at the same time, there will be an underlying yearning to begin to enjoy things that they have been missing out on for such a long period of time. Caution about health and hygiene. Whether you're a public transport provider, a restaurant, a fashion store, a motor dealer, or a coffee shop, people are going to have a natural reservation around social distancing and hygiene. Your customers will want to interact with you and purchase from you, but in order to guarantee that business, you'll have to ensure that you have these boxes ticked and that you have them clearly marked and/or communicated in your communications to customers. And caution about social spaces and interactions. Enochilophobia. Now, there's a new word that I hadn't heard of before this lockdown, and it's being mentioned a few times in the news. Enochilophobia is the very specific type of agoraphobia that refers explicitly to a fear of crowds. Now, obviously, I'm exaggerating for effect, but there has undoubtedly been a growth in anxiety relative to people being too close and being in a crowd. However, when restrictions are relaxed a little bit more, or they begin to be more relaxed on this, we will inevitably come out of this because it's in the human nature to be social creatures. It may just take a little while longer, and it's important that the hangovers above and around cautions relative to the economy and health and hygiene are covered to reduce some anxiety and entice your customers back to you. So these last few months have certainly broadened our vocabulary, with previously seldom used words becoming everyday parlance, such as furlough, epidemiology, and asymptomatic, to name just a few. The letter R is also being used more than ever, albeit as a number, but we can most certainly apply an R number of 4 to your business recovery. So some things you need to consider. Reassure your customers. Give them the confidence to shop with you, buy your product, or engage with your service. Ensure your physical premises are up to the demands of social distancing, your staff are protected, and trust me, customers notice that. Reduce any risk you can to a customer, because this in turn reduces the barriers they have to interacting with you. You can and should either have done this already or be doing it now. Reassess your target audience. For every single person listening to this webinar, all of you, bar none, have had the shape, look, feel, and behaviours of your core target audiences turned upside down. Now is the time to use research to understand what is now motivating them, what tensions they have, what new cohorts and behaviours have opened up for you to target. How they want you to speak to them will also be different now. Maybe not completely different, but different enough that the same old copy, design, style, and so on that you've used just might not cut it anymore. Reignite the passion for your brand or service and remind them why they loved you in the first place, and remind them why they should love you still. So be engaging, be inspiring in your communication, and excite the people so that your competitors' customers and your customers will have their head turned by you. And reconsider how you can do things from top to bottom if you can. Can you find new ways to target customers, new products to serve them, new services to trial, or new and innovative ways of working that will make your customers' lives both better and more worthwhile? So now we're going to move on to the next section, which is lining up for the race. So if the starting pistol is about to be fired, and we'll be off soon, as I mentioned. So let's be honest, you could be Mo Farah, but if you're at the back of this crowd when the gun goes, your chances of winning are over within a split second. You need a quick start to garner more custom and share than your competitor in this post-lockdown period. In fact, this picture could just as easily be everyone dashing to their first post-lockdown pint at the local pub when it comes. The point is, it's going to be really busy really quickly. So one thing that we must learn here is that you need to identify how best to carve out some space. So the thing to remember here is that there's no such thing as social distancing in the media landscape. There is no 2-meter rule between adverts, and you will not be given space by your competitors. So when the starting pistol is fired for your wave, as I said, it's going to get very busy very quickly and really loud really quickly. So we should all aim to be like Rodriguez or Jamal and be at the head of the pack here where possible. But in this section, we're going to help you understand how to position your brand and business to ensure that you don't get elbowed out of the way on the start line. A fast start is important, but as I've already said at the agenda, equally important is understanding that this is a marathon and not a sprint. So, as I mentioned already, unless you had it totally nailed down before lockdown, it's by no means a guarantee that all of your customers are going to all of a sudden come flocking back unless you give them a clear and compelling reason to do so. So now I'm going to tell you about a little bit about our way in which my business unit and John Paul's business unit here at CommunicorpUK operate, and our way which has helped countless customers over the years to get on track, steal a march and run all the way to business glory. CommunicorpUK's approach to your business and how we work is founded on a strategic approach, insight-led creative and rigorous planning. We help brands to life. We help bring brands to life through a consultative process and follow a flexible process that we adapt to suit our clients' individual needs. So the steps we go through to help you win and win well have never been more important. And it's a three-step formula, and I'd love to share it with you today. And as you can see there, step one is seek and discover. Now, this is the most important element of your entire strategy. This is the foundations of success. By using research and insight to form strategy, we start from a completely solid base and one upon which you know great strategy will be made. Brilliant work isn't born out of thin air. True difference doesn't just happen. So audit your existing setup and practices, research your business and market landscape, and get to know your audiences and competitors intimately so that you know the challenges you face and spot the opportunities you have. Bring it all together, all you've learned through the sweet spot between what makes you different and what your customers need and what will drive your business. So from here, you can develop your unique winning strategy from which our creative ideas will grow. Success is built on being different, and being different involves being super creative to strike a memorable chord. So connect and create is how to position yourself, and what you look, feel and sound like will determine that success. First impressions are lasting impressions when it comes to your brand identity. An idea is only brilliant if it rings true. Truth can be a subtle nod or a wave and a shout, but it will always be recognised. And from core branding to websites, packaging, style guides, social media and retail spaces, we have to develop a coherent brand personality and apply it in a new and original way to each and every customer touch point, which then takes us on to step 3, which is build and evolve. So the planning and implementation of your campaign will have a lasting impression. Every single additional pair of eyes or ears you can eke out will mean regular and quantifiable marginal gain. You build your brand kit and voice across all channels relevant to your business. Map out your needs and align key deliverables with your business's forecasting and timelines. Oftentimes, when you're this far advanced, your agency, strategist, or buyer can simply walk away and say, job well done. But not here. There's a way to go with how we see it. So through brand reviews and ongoing support, we'll help your brand evolve with every challenge and capitalise on every opportunity. And when all is said and done and we think we're near the finish line, it's important to note, as I said, that there isn't one. The battle for share of mind and share of market never ends. All that's happened here is that the market has temporarily paused, and unusually that's something that we only really see or have seen in wartime in the past. So the next race for dominance in your market is just around the corner. Behaviours have changed fundamentally, and it doesn't mean that people don't want to go back to everyday life, but we are living in a remember back when we had a lockdown moment, similar to things like 9/11, the volcanic ash cloud in Iceland and the Boxing Day tsunami in the Indian Ocean. We'll all remember this for generations to come. But what do all these groups have in common? Well, nothing really, and that's the point. I've always had some level of frustration at customers telling me that their target audience is everyone, or everyone with a driving license, or adults aged 25 to 64. It wasn't that simplistic before COVID-19, and it's almost certainly not post-lockdown. So if you're a motor dealer with multiple sites, new and used, for example, you could quite conceivably have customers across all of these tribes, which have been created by our friends at Kantar as a result of multiple waves of omnibus research carried out throughout this period. But your one-size-fits-all comms, marketing and advertising strategy won't work, but it needn't be complicated. Sometimes it's as simple as a tweak to a word, a colour, or a tone in a communication piece that makes the difference between turning on a customer and turning them off. Just because you focus on one or two of these groups absolutely doesn't mean to say you should alienate the rest. How your brand should approach these customers, what kind of messaging you should use, and where you can and should reach them are all up for debate in this post-lockdown world. And although this looks complicated, what all this really is telling us, though, is that we should simply communicate. Communicate, communicate, and then communicate some more. The tactical execution of how we do that comes after the playbook has been created. These cohorts aren't necessarily your cohorts, but we can help you on your customer profiling quest and provide you with a top-to-toe look at who these people are, how they live their lives, and exactly how they want you to reach out to them. So just wrapping up my piece, at the end of the day, unless you have one of these, no one really knows for sure what's going to happen and how quickly economic recovery will happen. It all depends on the length of lockdown and the time it takes to relax the rules across all 4 home nations. It will be different in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland to that of England, and so if your business operates in more than one of these countries, you might need to be prepared to take a staggered approach to your own business timeframes. The OBR predicts a second quarter between April and June will see a 35% drop in UK GDP this year. But what does this mean for the economic recovery? Fundamentally, it depends on how easy or straightforward the recovery is. So we've probably seen this before. 11th of May, government published a strategy for lifting lockdown measures in England and signalled a modest relaxation to social distancing rules from the 13th of May. That's about to change even further as of the 1st of June. But as of the 13th of May, people were allowed to leave their homes for multiple times per day, and for employees that cannot work from home to return to work following social distancing rules and avoiding public transport where possible. Other measures will stay in place, meaning restaurants and public venues will remain closed until at least the 1st of July. Fundamentally, how well the economy recovers is based on whether or not there's a second peak, and that will fundamentally determine how quickly all businesses can reopen and get back to some semblance of normality. So to highlight the critical importance of the application of strategy and distinctiveness, we can just look at a YouGov survey completed to a nationally representative sample of the population a couple of weeks back with some of these top line findings. 2/3 of British respondents, 69% in fact, agree that brands or companies are delivering similar or identical messages to one another in their communications. To explore this further, they gave respondents a list of coronavirus-related words and phrases and asked them which they were tired of hearing or believed were overused. The phrase "all in this together" topped the list with 42%. This was closely followed by "the new normal" and "unprecedented," both at 34%. And as so, we move on to this section about bringing this distinctiveness to life and applying that. I'll now pass you over to our Group Creative Director, John Paul Hughes, to take on the rest of the presentation. Over to you, JP.
Thanks, Keith. Yeah, thanks, guys. Thanks for tuning in. My name is John Paul Hughes. I am Group Creative Director at CommunicorpUK, as well as some of our enterprise businesses like VoiceWorks, our Voice First agency, Minefield, our freelance creative collective, and a few others. So as Keith said, just picking up on what Keith has talked about, I want to show you over the next 15 minutes or so how to realise the potential of what Keith has been talking about. And in particular, if one takeaway for you from what I'm going to talk about is the underused power and application of distinctiveness. So first up, I've got a short video to show you.
When we first opened our doors.
Since 1926.
Since 1978.
For 60 years.
For 75 years.
For over 80 years.
In 90 years.
Over 100 years.
Nationwide has been on your side.
Restaurants have always been there for you.
Nissan has been with you through thick and thin.
We will do what we've always done.
Take care of people.
We're people.
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 People. People.
People and family.
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 Family. Family.
Family.
Family. Family.
Family.
Families. Families.
Families.
Even now. Especially now.
Especially now.
Right now.
Now more than ever.
More than ever.
Today, more than ever.
Today,
More than ever.
In times like this,
At times like these, during these difficult times,
In these troubled times,
challenging times.
All right, Keith, I think we can pause it there. I think we've probably made my point. And the point is, that video is actually about 3.5 minutes long, and I would anyone who wants to go and see the full thing, you can find it on YouTube as every COVID-19 commercial. And the point I'm making is that advertising and marketing communications are in the midst of their own global pandemic, which I've nicknamed Copycat-19, where everybody is doing and saying exactly the same thing. If you look at this formula, somber cliche music, a reminder of how they've been there for you in these challenging, uncertain, difficult, unprecedented times, insert whatever adjective you wish, how we can all get through this together, how we must stay connected, how we're people too. Things are crazy right now and you're a little scared. We are too, yes, scared of losing sales. So here's some sad pictures of places you might recognise and some patronising patter about key workers. In other words, gripped by fear and a lack of understanding. Lots of brands, advertisers, marketers have rushed to pretend to be people's friend. And what they've done, in fact, is fallen down a black hole of inauthentic mimicry. As Keith's stats prove, people are pissed off with it. They're fed up hearing it. It is repeated ad nauseum. And 69% of people in that poll felt that all advertisers are saying exactly the same thing. In other words, what's happening is advertisers and marketers are wasting time, they're wasting money, and they're probably damaging their own reputation quite often by patronising the public. I can already see and envision the post-COVID advertising that's going to take place as we see lots of rising sunsets, friends laughing in open-top cars, all set to the Bill Withers track, Lovely Day. So how do you then avoid making the same mistake that some of these very well-known brands and other local marketers have made going into the pandemic as we actually step out of it? Well, the one secret to that is distinctiveness, the underused power of distinctiveness. Now, distinctiveness is important because as a species, we are hardwired to notice and remember what is different. This isn't some advertising or creative gimmick. This is a fundamental element of human psychology and behavioural psychology. Our species survival depended upon us noticing when something was different from the norm and reacting to it. And the academic evidence for this actually dates back to 1933. If we go back to 1933, Hedwig von Restorff was a paediatrics researcher at the University of Berlin when she published her study on memorability. Now, it was quite a simple study. Random sections of letters were shown to participants and they were interrupted by a section of 3 numbers. The respondents were taken away, there was a period of time passed, and then they were asked to recall any of the sections. And it turned out that respondents were 30 times more likely to remember the numbers. Why? Because they were different. So, that still applies today. Richard Shotton, who is the author of the book Behavioural Bias, and his research team conducted some very, very simple studies around this as well. And what they did is they gathered a list of logos, and you were shown 12 logos, 11 car brands, and 1 fast food brand. And again, after a pause, participants were asked, which can you recall? The fast food brand was 4 times more likely to be recalled. Keith, if you could skip on the next slide, mate. And all that means is that being distinctive makes you memorable. Now, this might sound blindingly obvious, but it is studiously ignored by advertisers. And I'm going to try and explain why. So why is distinctiveness so rare? First point is that nobody takes the time to explain. Now, there's a few reasons for that. The advertising and marketing industry is obsessed with what's coming along now. They tend to forget and burn what's gone before. Usually, in a rush to jump on the latest bandwagon, they abandon the fundamental human behavioural psychology that drives and determines behaviour and habit. There's another reason to that. It's probably a lot easier to sit in front of a client and take their money than have a difficult conversation about where the client may be making mistakes. Also, if someone doesn't take the time to explain it to you, what they may be doing is actually selling to you. When we dig into this behavioural psychology and look at distinctiveness, what we're interested in is selling to your customers. The second element why it's distinctive is so rare is safety in numbers myth. Now, the safety in numbers myth is very, very common. A lot of advertisers and clients think it must be right to do what other people are doing because everyone else in the market is doing it. So if they were doing it, that must be the way to do so, which is exactly why it's wrong. Now, a lot of people think creatives just want to be different. That's not the case. It's not just about standing out from the environment as flashy pyrotechnics. It is the safety in numbers myth. Keith, if you click onto the next slide, it shows us a brilliant quote from Vic Polkinghorne in the book Sell, his agency. What might seem like a safe choice in the confines of a boardroom will most likely be a waste of money when it's out in the real world. Advertising that feels safe or familiar is actually very, very risky. There's no safety in numbers when it comes to advertising. If someone else is doing something similar to what you're doing or looks or sounds like you are both in trouble. In other words, simply doing what others are doing, as we showed in that video at the very start, has a dilution effect for everyone and nobody notices the messaging. And that's really, really important because you can have all the strategy in place that you desire, but if nobody notices it, it doesn't matter. The third element of why distinctiveness is so rare is that case studies lead to mimicry. Now, often an advertiser will want examples of successful case studies from their business category before they commit to a course of action. But this can be a mistake because all too often what it does is then guide the next step and it leads to mimicry, as we see in the image we can see on the right-hand side of the screen. So what happens is a vicious circle is created and brands plough more money in regardless of the odds of success because they think they have safety in numbers, they've seen some case studies, and they want to copy what has gone before. The fourth and final element of why distinctiveness is so rare is the myopic approach to data. Now, what this means is that all too often decisions are made based on a slavish adherence to what data tells people. But data is only there to guide. It should not formulate a predictable outcome. I often say our job is to help people tell clients what they need in a way they don't expect. So very often, a focus group or a decision by committee is how someone will lead to a creative decision in what they execute. But the problem with that is that focus groups and decisions by committee are very often telling you their opinion based on what they've already seen, which is not distinctive. So focus groups are unbelievably valuable, but they are there to provide insight, not to guide specifically what that creative should be. We give them all a voice, but only one person a vote. There's an old, we tend to see this as a bit of a safety net or a cop-out if things go wrong. You might remember the old IBM slogan, no one ever get fired for buying an IBM. Well, that tapped into this fear. So, as we move on, what we see, again, is this lack of variation across all business categories. Car ads are full of drone shots and rounding mountainside bends, fashion ads full of models pouting at the screen. Look at watch adverts. These are the worst of all. The hands are always at 10:08 as the time in every single ad. Now that's chosen because the hands of the watch frame the brand logo, but it's got so bad the mimicry. The HTC advert for a mobile phone, which is a digital clock, still uses the time 10:08, even though there are no hands to frame the logo. So, distinctiveness pays. And distinctiveness pays because, as I mentioned, as a species, we are hardwired to notice what is different. And I'm going to give you a very quick couple of case studies, then conclude the takeaways. The first is one you'll all be familiar with. Go back to 2008, you had Go Compare, you had Money Supermarket, you had Confused.com and Compare the Market. Back in 2008, they were all doing the same thing. They were all forming a formula for their advertising. It all looked and sounded the same, and it all focused on functional benefits. But it was very much a Me Too product. Then in 2009, Compare the Market broke ranks and introduced the anthropomorphic meerkat Alexander Orlov, who we were all very familiar with. Now, this more emotional, distinctive approach had tremendous results. And cutting a long story short, what happened is that Compare the Market rose from 4th to 1st for consideration and unprompted awareness. Requests for quotes went up by 83%, and the company achieved its 12-month objectives in 9 weeks. They did that by being different. They were distinctive. They broke ranks and they stood out. When the average consumer today is hit with over 5,500 brand and advertising messages, how is yours going to be the one that's noticed and remembered? By being distinctive. Another example that occurred during COVID was Emily Snacks. Now, believe it or not, this brand was faced with the realisation that not many people would see its first ever outdoor ad campaign because it was due to go live as soon as lockdown kicked in. So they said to Clear Channel didn't want their money back. They just wanted to try something that might work for them by being a bit different. They didn't want to break the rules. They didn't want to encourage people to go outside. So they were distinctive. Instead of sending out the usual message that everyone else was doing, they know that from an outdoor perspective, compared to a normal campaign, this was going to get a lot less eyeballs. So they decided to gain media coverage and online coverage by going offline. And they ran these beautifully self-parodying, very self-aware ad campaigns. One that said our first ever poster seen by a runner and one pigeon, typical. And the second, maybe we should have made a TV ad instead. Now, the original campaign was centered around the idea the whole market eats boring crisps and that most brands all just copy walkers. That led to the creation of a campaign called Ditch the Dull, Eat the Bold, which Emily will still run when the lockdown is over. But they followed through on that distinctive mantra and made light of what was their first venture into outdoor advertising. It has resulted in millions of pounds worth of media coverage and exposure on news, on articles and newspapers that they could never have bought and paid for. And they did that through being distinctive. So, key takeaways from my point are very simple. 1, be distinctive. If you are not noticed, then all the planning, all the prep, the great media schedules, the insights you've gathered are academic if no one pays attention to it. If you want people to pay you money, they must first pay you attention, and you will not stand out by fitting in. Number 2, before you can win hearts and minds, which is the goal of every advertiser, you must first win eyes and ears. You do that by getting attention. You must seek inspiration from beyond your own category. Do not copy your competitors. If you go outside your category for inspiration, you will see one of the common factors of the few brands who have created a genuine step change in their category, and that is they were highly distinctive. As John Hegarty always says in the Levi's tagline, when the world zigs, zag. Number 3 is to subvert category norms. Your task, or the task of the creatives you work with, is to identify the formulaic rules of behaviour in your category and then smash them. That way, the spotlight will shine on your business much, much stronger. And finally, consider your target's age. Now, that might sound odd. Distinctiveness works on all people. It is a fundamental element of human behavioural psychology. But studies have shown that actually this has an even bigger effect on the under 30s. It works on everyone, but in the under 30s in particular, it is massively significant. So if your target's age, if you're targeting that millennial group and above, this will be even more effective than anything else. And as I said, distinctiveness is the one thing I want you to take away from my section. If this is on your marks, distinctiveness is not about competing, it's how you win the race. Thanks.
Thanks, John Paul. So that's us nearly at the end of the presentation. I hope you've enjoyed it, but just to summarise quickly on the last little while, there is light at the end of the tunnel for you, our customers, interested parties and trusted advisors. It has been absolutely crazy the last little while and an ever-evolving picture. But very soon we'll have some clarity around the economy, treatment against coronavirus and a better handle on new consumer psyches and behaviours. I've got a real interest in you getting ahead in the most successful way you can. The foundations of a super strong performance across the next 2 or 3 years should start now. Homework is your friend. Don't rush into anything until you are sure. Getting it wrong with your customers and communication can be very damaging. It can lose you previous customers and hamper you pulling a share of larger customers. Think Wetherspoons, think ASOS, think Sports Direct or Virgin. Sometimes businesses have to make tough decisions, but it's so important to communicate these in a way that's understanding, empathetic and seemingly done in the right way. At the same time, a hastily put together ad that talks about how you are operating on Zoom or Teams or are donating 10 loaves of bread a day to the NHS aren't going to help make you stand out and won't help you get back to where you need to be. You'll be going backwards. So remember the 3 steps to business success: seek and discover, connect and create, build and evolve. Do them all, don't skip corners and do them in that order. One of the most incredibly satisfying elements of my job is getting to see these well thought out strategies going through to delivery and seeing the objectives for your business come to fruition. I'm a nosy bugger and I'm grateful to have a job and profession that encourages me to be so. I want to know absolutely everything there is to know about target audiences, how people behave, how they think, how they feel and how they act. They can make a difference between you being a top performer and an also-ran. As JP mentioned, distinctiveness is critical to success. Without that, we go nowhere. And lastly, let's have a chat. If you have any doubts about how to shape your strategy and unlock the potential in front of you, then let's talk. Webinars aren't the ideal place to talk strategy, but we'd love to have a one-to-one conversation with anyone who sees this and that would like to learn more about setting yourselves up to succeed with a winning strategy. No obligation, and we'll happily give up a couple of hours of our team to chat through your problems, issues, opportunities, or plans over the next little while. Details will be appended at the end of this presentation. And finally from us, good luck with everything going forwards, and thank you very much, and thanks very much for joining. Cheers.
Lovely, thank you so much. I mean, we are a bit struck for time. I don't know if anybody has any burning questions right away, but if you do have questions later on, please do let us know, because we can forward them on and so forth. Yep, no, sorry, just checking the chat, there's not a question coming through. So yeah, just quickly, just say thank you so much, guys. That's been really insightful. I hope everyone on the call here has actually found it of use and taken away some great pointers today. So just to finish, we do have some upcoming webinars. So our next one is actually tomorrow, and that's going to be 5 steps to improving your marketing. So we sort of touched briefly here today on marketing and how important it is. So, you know, please do, if you are available tomorrow, join that one. Details are on our website. And then the 3rd of June, we are going to be having our second virtual networking event. So we held our first one earlier on in the month, and a huge success. So again, if you are available, this is a new way of doing the virtual networking, and it's a great experience. So please do join us for that one. We do have more webinars up on our website now, so please do take a look. So, you know, we've got one on the 11th of June that's to do with furloughing. So now that everybody's looking to coming back into the business and unfurloughing their staff, if you're unsure on what steps to take, then 11th of June, that will be the webinar for yourself. And again, looking at the connection between well-being and performance, we have a webinar on the 16th of June, which is looking at the data of what they call the fluffy stuff. And the battle for sanity. So again, looking at well-being, if that's the interest to you, that's the 16th of June. So thank you all for joining us. Hopefully we'll see you again on another webinar shortly. Again, thank you to Hertfordshire and the guys at Communicorp. Very interesting. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
No problem. Thanks very much.